What's up, everybody? Coming back here to the second part of the podcast. We ended last time on where we were talking about all the recap of 2024. Back with you. My name is Efren. With me always is my trusty co-host, Coop.
What's happening?
So I'll let you pick up with where we left off.
I think we were talking about Teflon Don when we stopped. And, I mean, I don't know if any politician in history has had for the last 3 presidential cycles, he has been the main character. And in 2016, he was the underdog. 2020, he was probably the heavy favorite. And then COVID ends up hitting. And he mishandles COVID to a point. And then 2024, he comes back. And there's a lot of people, who are saying like, oh man, this guy doesn't have a shot because of what happened on January 6th. And he's been impeached twice, and he's a felon, and he's almost been assassinated. If you wrote this guy as a character in a movie or a book, there's too much. You just be like, nah, this can't happen. But it did. And then he won again. And then he won the popular vote.
So is it one of those things that people just get tired of the accepted norms and they want to be something different? Because, that used to be the running on that, well, we want a political candidate who's got experience. Until Obama, he was only a one-term senator. He's like, well, he don't have the...
Whoa, you can't discount... See, people do that, but you got to talk about, if you're going to say that starts with Reagan. Because Reagan, California senator...
But he was on a political realm for some time. He didn't just all of a sudden, you heard about it, and then he ran. Like Obama, I didn't hear anything about Obama until he started running. I was like, okay. Then you look back and it's like, well, he's got to have a long history. No, he's a first-term senator from Illinois. I'm like, wait, really?
Yeah.
And you're right, you do overlook Reagan, but Reagan had been on the political realm for some time. He didn't just spring up and stuff for that way. So it's funny how they read Obama the right at 8 years prior, but all of a sudden Trump, oh, I like him because he's outside of the belt line. He's outside of the norm. We don't need a politician now. We want we want a businessman to run it. Well, what makes you think the businessman's going to run it above the board, cleanly? Okay.
Yeah, John McCain gave the term maverick. But when I always think about those maverick candidates, I started with kind of Reagan, but Bill Clinton is somebody who was not part of the Democratic establishment. He was a governor from a southern state in Arkansas. A kid from Hope, Arkansas became part of that campaign slogan because people just didn't know him well enough. And then George W. Bush is a son of a president, but not the one anybody thought was going to be the president. Everybody had their money on Jeb. So then George W. happens, and then Obama, you're right. Obama in 2004, DNC gives that fantastic speech.
Yep.
This is not a black America. It's not a white America. It is the United States. From that moment, from that speech. But even in 2007, during that primary, everybody thought it was going to be Hillary.
So because it was a given name. You knew Clinton.
You knew Clinton so well. And she was a senator from New York at the time.
Correct.
She was very popular, very polished. But then the Obama momentum was crazy. But then Trump never has the same type of energy in 2016. In fact, I remember like people talking about how bad he was in the debates. But the one thing he was really good at was the jabs. Like the low energy jab.
The one-liners, yeah.
And Small Ham Marco and Ted Cruz's ugly wife. And some people watched that and enjoyed it, and they're like, yeah, this is what we need. But then we have 4 years of Trump where everybody thought, like, once he becomes president, he'll act more presidential. But he never did.
Facts, yeah.
Like, when you go back and watch the clips during his first presidency.
Oh, yeah, I remember those pictures being replayed when he was at one of those G8 summits or whatever way, and he's pushing world leaders aside to get up in front to take a photo and stuff, and because it was all about me and stuff that way. I'm just like, he's no longer Donald J. Trump, the private citizen. He's Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. You are representing the whole country, so you need to act. There's a particular decorum and way you need to handle and carry yourself.
So this is where I think the big trend from this year, we can simply call the rise of the American oligarchs. Where I think that when we talk about Russia and their system, we use that term a lot. In America, we've always had millionaires and billionaires participating in our system, but we've never had those guys with nearly the amount of power of Elon Musk.
It's interesting you make that comment because I happened to see a tweet today by Ramaswamy, who's going to be the co-head of Doge. He's talking about how he's not a fan of outside bureaucrats and political influences, or outside bureaucrats trying to affect political change. That's why you need to vote on and have voted representatives do it that way. And it's like, hold on, time out. That's what essentially you're going to be.
Yes.
You didn't get voted in that position. You got picked because you had some kind of influence in the Trump sphere, the Trump universe and stuff that way. But essentially you're railing against what you are.
Yes.
So it's like, how can you be that way? But I think you're right. If you're in the right place at the right time, like Alexander Hamilton said you want to be in the room where it happened.
Yeah, I mean, Vivek is an interesting one because you're right. His ideas were rejected by the Republican primary participants. He didn't win a single primary. But now his ideas some of them are being embraced by the president-elect. And Vivek he's wealthy and he's appealing to Trump. So Trump has brought him into the fold. And you can even say that when he was running for president, he really felt like the guy who was openly running for vice president.
He did. 100%.
You know what I mean? Like every single time. But, Vivek, at least he was transparent and honest all the way through. Nikki Haley and people like that, on the other hand, refused to kiss the ring until it became very obvious that Trump was going to be the winner. And then she kissed the ring. And now she's still trying to be the new Mitt Romney with no real political power. Where she's trying to say, like, whoa, pump the brakes. We shouldn't give Trump everything. But again, she's been rejected. And I don't just say Elon. I think one of the interesting moments of this whole election cycle was the Washington Post losing half of their editorial staff because the owner, Jeff Bezos, said they weren't going to endorse a presidential candidate. And then Mark Zuckerberg and others following that same thing. And since Trump has won, they've all now contributed to his inauguration fund.
Yep.
And they've also all made the trip to Mar-a-Lago. And is that Mar-a-Lago? Did I say that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It sounded weird when I said it. It made it sound like it was like a movie from back in the day. But yes, they've all now made that trip, and they're all kissing the ring. And you just wonder, Trump already set the record during his first term for president with the most millionaires in his cabinet. So now this new administration, it seems like one of the requirements is you have to be very successful in your field or in some other field. So it's just interesting to see, like, I think this all starts with Feingold, McCain-Feingold, where you had a Democratic and a Republican senator tried to take money out of the process of politics, and the Supreme Court smacked them, and they said that corporations get to express free speech through money. And now we've gone all the way. We're halfway through this decade, and now we're seeing the full power of that. And now it's like, yeah, what are Elon Musk's like credentials for that position in government? This is the guy who openly opposes any type of DEI programming. But now we have a African American who has access to the president in a way that no other African American since Frederick Douglass has had.
Well, but what's crazy is that, you stop and think, he took advantage and gamed the system. He was here on a visa, student visa, to get a job. He got a job. Now there's some question about, did his visa overlap? Did it run out? Should he have not really been here? Should he have gone back? He started a company after his visa expired, so that way. But I mean, he gamed the system and it worked out well. That way. Is it good? Is it bad? It's up to you to decide. But if it's you gamed it, you did good, you beat the system. If it's not, you think it's bad because it's against from what your standpoint, that way. And him being, he wanted to buy Twitter, X, whatever you call it now, as a way to make it open to people. And now I've seen where people are upset with him because he's censoring some of the right-wing media or some of the right-wing people because of they're going against some of the stances he's got, by the way, because he's got a direct ear and pull on 47. So it's like, well, no, I don't want you trying to criticize me, what I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to get me and mine when I got the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Elon is, because maybe that's the other big trend, is not just the rise of oligarchs, but the rise of Elon Musk, where for a long time he's been very influential in certain segments,
Oh,
but
yeah.
now he's everywhere all the time. He's in Paris for the reopening of the cathedral. He's in Moscow meeting with Putin, with Trump sometimes by himself. And it's just like, you know what, with Elon Musk, I think we have one person to blame. So people will say like the rise of Trump, you can blame on Obama because of that one correspondence thing when Obama
100%.
lit him up. But with Elon Musk, I think it's more like you gotta blame Robert Downey Jr. Because I think Iron Man 1 was so good and so impactful that Elon Musk watched that and said, I can be Tony Stark. And because like when you look at characters like Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark, Batman and Iron Man, the thing that makes them superhuman is wealth. So Elon Musk in his head is thinking, I'm doing the same thing. The only thing that Elon Musk, the one thing when he said he's gonna get Twitter to eradicate trafficking through Twitter, they really haven't touched that. They
No.
still say that thing is just as popular in that way as it's ever been. But in every other area, I mean, somebody's like, yeah, but he's cost Twitter overall value. I'm like, I don't understand how he has because his individual wealth has gone through the roof. And his influence and power. I mean, there are young kids out there who are saying, when I grow up, I want to be Elon Musk. And it don't matter what I got to do to get there.
It is interesting, you referencing Tony Stark in a movie character or a comic book character that kind of sort of spurred him on to be Elon Musk. It's funny, I can remember when the show 24 was on back in the day with Dennis Haysbert, great actor. He was African American, and he was president in that show 24, and it was like, oh man, I don't know. But then you see, black president then in those shows, and he did good. Then you start seeing Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact as a president of the United States and stuff that way. And then not too many years later, Obama runs. So it's like it's interesting seeing how, life imitating art and vice versa that way. That they put a character out there and just like, I don't know about this. And then you see it that way and just like, well, why not? I could see this race or this person or this sex or some way doing those things. So it's interesting how it gets introduced and then all of a sudden it's like okay to happen.
Well, this is where the right is about to start saying, Mr. Renteria, we got to get you a sponsorship. Because they will argue Hollywood has always been left and always been more progressive. So some of the ideas that Hollywood has, the country's not ready for, but then Hollywood puts it on a screen and you watch it and you go, you know what? Not nearly as bad as I thought it'd be. So then people become more comfortable with it.
Yeah, 100%.
So maybe Hollywood takes America out of the closet because if you watch the diversity on television, man, diversity on TV makes the country seems way more diverse than what it really is. Because some groups are overrepresented. Like I had a friend who hated the show Grey's Anatomy because of that. And she said, man, there are not this many people from this group or that group, but they represent it like America's perfect. And I'm like, well, Grey's Anatomy is in Seattle, Washington. So maybe the reality there is more diverse than Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, it is the flip side, with that way, because I know a lot of people in the social and lexicon were upset when like Hamilton came out there because they were minorities playing these roles of founding fathers. It's like, well, no, they were all white men. Yeah, that was what the time with it was because that was the way it was in those days. But, when the creator, Lin-Manuel Miranda, made it, he's like, no, I want it to represent the people who live in America today on if they were the founding fathers for that way. So, it is good to have it swinging both ways. But I think it depends on what side of the world you live on. Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? Do you like it? Do you hate it? It just varies on what the media is that you're enjoying and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I see people like that all the time where it's like somebody reproduces a Shakespeare and they do it in traditional American English rather than these and thous and those. And I'm like, well, I mean, again, and this is where I'm always telling people, man, again, a Kendrick reference, turn off the TV. Like, if you don't appreciate something in that format, turn it off. I mean, me as a consumer of history and art, I like to critically think. So when Hamilton is presented in that light, I'm like, man, he is telling parts of the story that even as a American history fanatic, he is revealing stuff that I either wasn't taught or didn't know well enough that makes me want to go look into it more. So yeah, I mean, what he did for Hamilton for kids who are now young adults, he gave them an interest in American history that is refreshing. Like I had kids who are like, I was never interested into the founding fathers because I thought they were all boring and super morally right. So then I read Hamilton and I hear about this affair, and then I'm learning about Sally Hemings for the first time. So now all of a sudden I have more questions. So it made my classes better. So as a history teacher, I was thankful for it. But I think Hollywood, for a long time, took the seriousness of making the country think and making them ask questions. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all times, I now know most of it is fiction, was JFK. And I remember as a teen watching that clip with the Cerrutor clip and saying like, oh yeah, this is clear that this bullet, and then later on finding out like, no, that film doesn't really show it exactly that way. So I think that's the role. I mean, the problem has become now we live in a postmodern time period where objective truth is questioned. So people are now openly saying like, is this real or is this fake or has this been doctored? And with deep fake, I mean, a lot of the stuff you see today, you got to say like, I don't know how real this is.
That definitely makes it harder, and I think that's the unfortunateness of misinformation is such a big business. And I hate to say it like that because it was never that way. It was always, there were 3 channels, and if all 3 were in agreement, then it had to be fact. Well, now you can't get any of the news channels to agree on certain things, and if they can, it's like there are 5 pieces, and a couple of them might agree on 3 of the 5 pieces that way, 2 of the 5 pieces that way. So now this is all fake and stuff. So yeah, it is unfortunate that that's the way that it is, but it does though create, it gives people an opportunity to go look at it for themselves to find out what's good and bad, and you do find out more about history that sometimes they are flawed historians and stuff that way. So it's good for the country to be that way, you know.
Another big one for 2024, and ChatGPT has been around for a while, but now we've gotten into the era of, we saw part of that Drake Kendrick thing where TaylorMade was Drake using Tupac and Snoop's voices on a song through ChatGPT. And now we're seeing, seems like every month, one of these AI services presents more and more like technology where now they're lining up the voices better with the visuals. So now you're seeing entirely fabricated newscasts basically created by ChatGPT. And I think as a teacher, sometimes I'm thinking, how can I use these resources in a classroom in a professional manner to present stories? But then as a consumer and as a concerned citizen, I keep thinking like, at some point, somebody's going to use ChatGPT to create something that's terrifying or that is completely a fabrication and ruin people's lives. And again, I think like without having an accountability system set up to regulate that, I just think it's just a matter of time before we all witness something that was doctored and not knowing it was doctored, and then be stuck in a situation where
100%.
people are going to question truth to a point where it gets dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things of it's hard to see, you know, what people are saying and stuff that way. You almost have to verify it separately. But there's some people who they only get their media from a certain spot. They only get their news from a certain spot. They go nowhere else but that certain site. It's got to be truth. And just like, it's not that way. You need to really look at the way the world is because it just isn't like that all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's unfortunate, but you're right. Even the ChatGPT thing, you were laughing in the field that I work in. I've seen where there was an attorney who tried to actually turned in a brief to the court, and it was citing cases and stuff. And I looked it up and was like, "What? These were all made up." He had cited from ChatGPT to write a motion or a brief or something that way, and turned it in, and they were like, "This was completely fabricated." So and stuff. So you even have to be careful of even people are using it, you know, to doctor information or turn in legal documents and stuff with that way. So it's scary to stop and think what that was going to go. Even in your world of teaching, I can only imagine. You know, I know they used to be back in the day with us. They would go and copy and paste your whole report and put it into like a plagiarism kind of sort of scheme to make sure you hadn't plagiarized it that way. So I wonder what kind of checks and balances.
Well, they have ChatGPT 0. And ChatGPT is very upfront with saying like the information we're giving you, we're getting from search engines. And if you know anything about a search engine, any fool can submit work that doesn't get vetted. So that's the thing with ChatGPT is like it exists in real time. So it's incredibly hard to vet it. And that's why I'm like, man, like you're saying, like the vetting piece of it, the research that goes into it is incredibly important. And we're still at the the web crawler version of it. Like at some point, Internet Explorer and Safari, something else is going to come that's going to make it perfected. And that's when we're going to be in real trouble. Because you're going to look at an image that's going to be you. And you're going to say, I know I didn't do that, but I'm watching this clip and it really looks like me. So yes, Mr. Officer, I must be guilty because I'm watching this image of me doing something that I'm pretty sure I didn't do. But I'm seeing the video evidence at the same time. And I'm like,
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting to see where it'll be, where the ChatGPT or the AI will be in. You used to say like, hey, 10 years time, 15 years time, we're going to be a different spot. But it almost seems like within a year, within months, it seems like that.
because it's happening so quickly. You know where the big battle's happening right now is Hollywood in this.
That was a big deal when they did the strike this
Yeah,
year.
the image, and when people heard that, I'm like, you understanding what they're saying is saying like, hey, Channing Tatum, we want to hire you for this movie, but for the action scene, we don't want to pay for a body double. So what we're going to do is take your imaging, and the technology is so good that we're going to be able to use this image as the body double. We're still going to pay your dues, but we just have to pay the stunt double.
Yeah.
And there's no risk to him. So all that sounds good until you realize they now own a digital copy of you. So in 10 years, they want to do a sequel to this movie. We don't need Channing Tatum anymore.
Yeah.
But even scarier to that is the fact that they have a technology that can take a picture of you and they can perfectly copy you. So then there's a crime that occurs and they can just drop you into that crime. And I'm like, man, this is why Mission Impossible, from the beginning, Mission Impossible 1, remember when he took the face off?
Yep.
This is why Mission Impossible has always been better than the Bourne series to me. Terrifying, but they were doing that stuff. That's the Mission Impossible spy game. I love James Bond. I just got the new Ian Fleming's biography. I'm excited to read it. But to me, Ethan Hunt and Mission Impossibles, every movie there was some type of technology where I was like, that shit right there looks real. Like,
But almost though, to a certain extent though, is it so unbelievable that it makes it hard to believe it? Because I mean, like the Bourne, at least they use practical stuff, so you could see you doing that. But Mission Impossible almost treads on so far in, like, technology doesn't exist yet.
Matt Damon has limitations, right? So he has limits where Tom Cruise doesn't. He's a better action hero.
Yeah, okay, I'll grant you that. But at the same time, too, it's some of the stuff that they do, you have to suspend reality because they haven't developed that technology yet.
Your argument right now is saying that you think that what Tom Cruise does is unbelievable.
I didn't say what he does in those movies.
Well, he does all his own stunts.
Okay, that's different.
So,
His stunts are good. But you can't tell me we can't go to some retailer now and go buy X number of dollar 3D printer to print a fake skin for you now to wear on our face and walk in as somebody. They don't have that existing now, right?
Yeah, we do.
To go 3D print a mask to put on my face.
Yeah, we do.
Come on, son. There's no way.
You never watched none of those reels?
I've seen some of the reels, but the plastic, it doesn't look like it's real now, man.
So, all right, so this is like what this is the scary stuff about our system that we never know until decades later. It's like the computer, man. Like we know that the day-to-day computer that we started using in the late 80s, early 90s, the government had in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Like the internet, like the Soviet Union and the United States was using the internet to avoid the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
Like all those things existed, but they don't roll that out to everybody until, that technology has gone through a point of, it's kind of like the medicine thing, where with certain pharmaceuticals, companies get to make money off of it before the generics available. So with certain spy technology, I guarantee you they get decades to make money off of it as private before it becomes the generic to the public. And even when we get the generic to the public, we get it at a version where they slowly roll it to us. They don't give us the full strength of it. This is like my kids. Me and my kids love watching random reels. Some of the most fascinating one is watching technology in China, and then my kids being like, "Why don't we have that?" And I'm like, part of it is because we don't want to get involved with some of the political stuff involved in China, so those companies aren't allowed here.
Yeah.
And in the same way, like that's how the government treats us as citizens, as children. Mm-hmm. So like, can we afford for this technology to get out for everybody? Imagine if Zoom was available in the 80s instead of 40 years later in the 2020s. Like, so if you told me in the 80s that I can have a technology where people didn't have to come to the office, but they can work at home comfortably and still produce at the same level, and we still can have meetings on this screen. Come on, man, the production of this country would have slowed down 40 years earlier.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, they had that in Back to the Future when that movie came out in 84 and 85. Remember that movie
but they
came
also
out?
had a flying skateboard.
A car in 2015, and we're nearly 10 years. We will be 10 years past that, and we still don't have a flying car.
We do have a flying car.
Like it is in that movie.
Well, maybe not in that same fashion, but we have some form of it now.
Okay.
I mean, like when you look at some of these electric cars today, and you see the way they operate, I think what we're doing is slow play in it. So what's the biggest perk besides the fossil fuel consumption being cut in half? But what's the big perk to these electric cars?
The biggest perk?
Yeah. The self-driving feature.
Oh, yeah.
So the only way flying cars can work in our society is self-driving. No human will be able to drive itself.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, you stop and think, I mean, the years and money that you have to get a pilot license. You can't just randomly have a car that's fly. How are you going to govern that?
Just think of the last couple of weeks, all the plane issues lately. Birds, people sneaking on. It's just so much more with air traffic control that you can never trust a person. Regular people, I'm not saying pilots, please trust pilots, continue to fly.
100%.
But I'm saying like regular, ordinary Bob from down the street is now tired from work and he's going to get into a vehicle where he's going to fly. Where if he has an accident, it's not just the other driver who's in trouble, but the people underneath as well. So I think the problem has become is like, we have to build up our society to prepare them for things like that. So it's like, yeah, so self-driving, I think in the next, it's not going to happen as fast as people want. Because in reality, I want to say 10 years, right?
But they already have self-driving vehicles now.
No, but it's not the norm yet.
Well, no. But I mean, I can remember even when they were doing tests at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
In those HOV lanes, the self-driving vehicles and stuff, and how that even seemed so far out of the norm that just seemed, scary is not the right word, but concerning. You know.
Yeah, but now Ford had a commercial with Blue Cruise. Mm-hmm. Like that all is very much coming very, very soon.
Well, even in California, they have Waymos, cars that you can come in their driverless vehicles that pick you up and take you places.
So we're getting closer to it, but we're still probably, think about it this way. How many times are you in your car and you're driving and you see somebody with their phone legitimately in their hand because they're talking to somebody, even though they're in a newer car where they don't need to hold the phone?
Yeah.
So there are certain people who have habits that they have to get rid of. And when I say get rid of, this is not one of those Dr. Death panel things. They're just waiting for them to age out and die or stop driving. So then, I think Will Smith's movie I, Robot probably did some damage in some areas. Because I think people still see the movies like that and think like, can we really trust robots? But the reality of it is, in our lifetime, there's going to be hospitals that are going to get rid of orderlies have robots.
Well, look, man, they've had that around since even the 80s. Look at Terminator and Skynet. You know, those things. You know, we gave power to the machines in Terminator, and they were trying to make the world a better place because we as humans were destroying it.
Yes. Yeah, that's why you don't want the robots to have their own thoughts. You want them to be some version of a search engine that's really advanced. But the Elon Musk robots now, they literally look like the iRobot robots. Like when you see them, at first I thought this is somebody dressed in these suits. But no, they took one apart on a YouTube channel. Somebody spent like $30,000 basically to get possession of one just to take it apart, and then they put it back together. It's super interesting. But those things exist. And my wife said, do you really think people are going to pay $30,000? I'm like, yeah, people pay $30,000 for a car.
Oh yeah,
I mean, if
yeah, and
you're
the car
telling me
they
that I
use.
want to start a business and I'm going to invest $30,000 into a robot that's going to do exactly what I want it to do, any type of business you start,
Oh,
that
100%.
robot is going to make you so much money. That's the end. It's going to be a write-off.
Yeah,
And they said those are going to be 20 to 30,000 in the next couple of years.
yeah, I could see that way of stuff. Of ChatGPT being one of the big tenants there in 2024. With that, do you think it will? Will it have to get to the point that a country, a entity, is going to have to regulate that, or are you just going to let the free market do it?
Well, it's interesting because Elon Musk has been saying for years that when they first had all these ideas for ChatGPT, that him and the group of people were thinking about it, saying that they're saying that it was not going to be for profit and that it's going to be available to everyone and it was going to be somewhat regulated. And now he's kind of gone against it. So it'll be interesting. I don't know how you regulate.
I mean, is it if it's considered a product? It's like, cars have national, the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board. They govern safety of vehicles and planes. Insurance is also govern those things. Make sure that there are certain insurance rating for this and blah blah, and they get insurance and based on the value of the car, the way the car's built, safety restrictions that way. So they have those things that are regulated that way, but they don't regulate the price of the car. The market does that way. So you got to have some kind of safety put in place.
Yes, so I think there's going to be safety parameters, but how do you do that? Like, I'm an Apple guy, but it's impressive when you watch that Google Gemini commercial.
Oh yeah,
where they're having the full conversation.
and that's creepy, by the way. A coworker of mine has that, and based on the context on their phone, knows who I am, knows my wife's name, my son's name, and when it talks to me, has asked me before when I've carried on the conversation, how is your wife so-and-so doing? How is your son so-and-so doing?
Yeah,
Stuff like that way. And it's creepy that it interacts with me.
Intellectual property is very interesting, right? And again, it's like every single time you sign a phone contract with a company, remember Verizon used to print it out if you asked them to, and it would be like a receipt that was like CVS competition. And nobody read it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so then who's that intellectual property become? And now they're becoming a question about people who are lonely. And then now all of a sudden they have these AI companions, and they're like, I'd like to marry this thing.
Well, like that movie Her that came out a couple of years ago with Joaquin Phoenix, and that
You
way
know
where
what?
he developed their
That
relationship.
movie won
with her.
awards, but nobody saw it because the sex scene is so weird. But again, this is like Oppenheimer last year. There are just times when you're like, if they would just eliminate that one scene, and I understand it adds to the complication of both those movies, but I think Her will be a great movie to show in a high school, not middle school or elementary, but high school, to have a conversation like, is this the end game? Like, so people are so lonely that they want this companion that they can have at any time. Will this thing lead to abandonment of other relationships? So,
But it definitely will then lead into the thing of, will that cut down on societal interactions? Because I mean, remember COVID came out there. Oh my gosh, those are people who are introverted. This is great. I don't have to leave my home. I can contact with the world via my computer, Zoom, video screens, video calls, whatever that way. I don't have to interact with anybody. This is great. But then you started seeing kids where they were so developed and so a crutch of the technology, it was like they didn't know how to interact with people, and now they get the nervousness and shyness again, which I'm sure you've seen the ebb and flow of it being a teacher. So it's just like it's great to have, but is it to a detriment because people won't not have human interactions anymore?
And then you add the other part of it, capitalism. So even if it is to the detriment, if some company's making money off of it, does it even matter?
Oh no, because they're going to look at it from the standpoint of they're making money, we're improving the world as a whole, the society as a whole. The world needs this. If it didn't, it wouldn't have demanded for this. We didn't see the need. We didn't feel the need.
And this leads to the next trend, TikTok. So now Donald Trump has asked for the TikTok ban to be suspended because it's supposed to go into effect the day before the inauguration. So now Donald Trump is petitioning and asking for it not to go in place yet because TikTok is now part of the American marketplace. There are a lot of people making millions and millions of dollars off of TikTok, and now that stream is going to be stopped right when he gets sworn in as president. So now it becomes that battle on who regulates that space where people are creating? And it even comes to a point where, like, the regulation of crypto. So we live in a society where we love free market, but the thing with free market since almost the beginning of the country is we've always found ways to regulate it to keep it safe. So tobacco, you know what I mean? When the country first started, we didn't have as many regulations, so everybody smoked.
Yeah, 100%.
But then we found out it was unsafe for children. So then we said you got to be over 18. Then later on we said for women who are pregnant might not be the best. So then we add that warning. Then we get to the 90s and those lawsuits, and then we're just like, nobody should be smoking. So we made it harder for people to smoke. And then young people started vaping at a level, and then we changed the smoking age from 18 to 21. So at every step, we wanted the tobacco companies to make money, but we added some type of regulation. Now we have things like crypto, and not just TikTok, but YouTube, where people, influencers can create with very little regulation. And there has been more regulation in the last decade or so, but there's still a part of it where you're like, yeah, I mean, the Hawk 2 girl, I mean, wow, 2024. You know, one statement on one video made this girl really, really popular. She was everywhere. And then she stepped into crypto. And people were so familiar with her face, she felt like a family member. So people took their entire savings and invested in her stock. And less than 24 hours later, the stock had stopped trading. People had lost their wealth. And then they wanted to sue. And then legitimately, people were saying an investment goes bad because you invested in a system and in a person that you didn't know nearly as well as you thought. Whose fault is it?
But I mean, that's always been the unfortunateness of people wanting to get rich quick. I mean, look at Bernie Madoff and that guy earlier this year, Sam Fried.
Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, the guy from the FTX. Same kind of sort of deal. You know, and they sued a lot of those guys. Tom Brady and those guys who got in crypto.
Yeah, wait, hang on. You
get
can't make
sued.
Sam part of 2024.
No.
That was much earlier.
No, it was this year. Going back looking at
No,
it.
he got in trouble like in 2022, and then he's got sentenced this year.
But he was still part of the with the problem that America always has with the get rich easy scheme.
Yeah, but I think crypto is a little bit different than that because, like, no matter how you feel about crypto, the reality of it is it's branch chain theory. So it's not me. It's not like I can go to a grocery store and see the product I'm investing in or drive down the street and see the companies I'm invested in. This is an invisible system built on the trust of other people. So it only works if we're all in on it. So in some ways, they were investing in Hop too.
Yeah, but is it just one of those things that because it's out there socially, more acceptable, like the crypto.com arena in LA and stuff, people see it out there and they see these faces that are attached to that.
1,000%. And again, like there are people like Dogecoin. Some people invested in Dogecoin when it was like 0.00007. And those people have made tremendous wealth. But when they invested in Doge, they knew it was connected to Elon. So in that moment, you're not trusting the currency, you're trusting the person. So it's like, Warren Buffett has written books. My whole portfolio is built off of Berkshire Hathaway. So half of my investments are with that one company in particular. So then when Warren Buffett comes out and says, hey, I'm moving some of my money this direction because this is no longer making money like it was, then I'll listen to that and make that trust. These people saw this girl say, spit on that thing, built her whole portfolio off of it. She introduces a currency that sounded really funny, like hot coin or whatever.
Yeah, hot coin, I think is what it was.
And they invested in it. And now they want to play it. Come on. Can you?
I mean, that ultimately falls at the feet of, you need to know more about what's going on. It goes back to with the political election this year and the misinformation being out there. Does that just go back? Is that another tenet of 2024 that people
No,
don't
that's
remember?
like the 20th and 21st century. Yellow journalism goes all the way back to that Spanish-American War with muckrakers and, guys making stories up. And I think that we can probably talk about the 21st century and the de-emphasis on education. So I'm always telling students, like, by your junior and senior year, teachers shouldn't be building on your idea base. They should be teaching you how to decipher and critically think. So at that point, it's all about critical thinking. By the end of your senior year, you should be at least starting to figure out how the world works and critically think. College is where you really shape it, which is why a lot of times people say, like, I hate the idea that everybody goes to college because some people should focus on vocation. I'm always nervous about that because I'm always like, you can go into a job and learn how to do one trade forever. And in some of those fields, like an electrician, that might be the best decision ever. But at some point, you're going to need to know how to critically think. And going to college and learning how to critically think and defend arguments and statements and knowing how to decipher what's true and what's real is very important for everyone. So when you go through a traditional high school and your senior year, you're not taking economics or civics or deeper level histories, and then you say, I'm going to go in, and I'm not dissing vocations, but I'm saying when you do that and neglect developing critical thinking skills, that messes up the whole future of you. Because at some point, no matter what field you work in, you're going to have to be able to critically think. So if me leaving this job today and going to this job, in 10 years, is this a better financial decision for me? Me stacking PTO days and never taking a mental health day, is this a good decision in the short term or the long term? No, they're all critical thinking skills that you should pick up as you get more education. I would not expect a third grader and a 12th grader to be learning the same lessons from the same history classes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because it's definitely one of those things that you need to be able to understand why the way that the world is, but understand it, how it affects you. Because I think some people, because they don't know how to critically think, they think, well, I'm going to go vote for the president because that affects my life. In actuality, that's like throwing a pebble in the ocean.
Yes.
You'll see a ripple with where you stand, but the greater scheme of life, it doesn't affect anything else that way. So whoever lives in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue has got nothing to do with my daily everyday. You need to worry about with those local politicians that affect you, but without having those critical thinking skills, you're not going to realize that that person way over there at 1600 Pennsylvania ain't going to affect me. So I need to worry about my people who live here with what I affect every day in my life and with that way. So you definitely need to have those critical thinking skills.
My biggest fear is what happens in my classroom is happening in every classroom. Where I'll have students come to my class eager to learn, and then they'll say, Mr. Cooper, what do you think about this? And I'll start to explaining something to them, and I go, you tell me what you think about it. And they're like, I don't know, I heard about it, but when I heard about it, I turned off the TV because I hate the way they talk about it. I'd much rather you tell me about it. So then I'm like, my influence is too strong. So I want you to be able to hear it and decipher it, and then we have a conversation. So that's why I don't do current events in my classroom, because there are too many students who I'll teach them something in class, and then later on I'll talk to a very impressed parent who's like, you know, my son told me this. I'm like, man, that sounds great. Yeah, you should think it sounds great because it's exactly what you taught them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, critical thinking and teaching people how to critically think is so very important. And I think right now, this is probably the last trend of the year that we're starting to see it, is the conversation that continues in America about immigration. And is literally one of the oldest conversations in this country, the way we've viewed immigrants. And I think this current chapter is a very interesting one because Elon Musk, he's influencing the president, and this man's view on immigration has been interesting since he got here. Americans have a shortage of people. And immigration is one answer because if you ask young people how many kids they want, everybody says 1 or 2. I'm not hearing people saying they want 10 kids anymore. So for our economy continue to expand, we need consumers and producers. And so now it seems like Elon Musk and the Trumposphere, I love that term, MAGA-sphere. I hear people use it that verse too, the MAGA-sphere. They're having a conversation about preferred immigrants again. And this is an old conversation in America about, I mean, it's always been around. Nobody's openly talked about it the way they're arguing about it currently on the right. About getting rid of lottery systems and maybe even getting rid of the association rule. So for you to come here from another country, you got to have a family member or somebody who can kind of vouch for you, and instead making it purely merit. So what can you add to the country? And I think that's a really interesting one, and it's going to be interesting to watch this play out.
I mean, it's definitely one of those things that it's a struggle for me, being that my father's from Mexico. My mom was born here in the United States. I'm a United States citizen. I was born here. So I understand the having of, the immigrant background and stuff. So I get 100%. But it's such a strong line of, if you're not born here, we don't want you here. But that's how America was started.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like you're turning your back on the founding of the country. That's everybody who came here was immigrants. So why do it that way? Yeah, if you can be here, exist in the laws, the societal norms, everything that adheres to the way they want you to be, I get that way. But there's enough room for everybody. It's not just that way. And there are a lot of great things that get stuff done. Perfect example, Elon Musk is not an American citizen. He's from...
No, he is an American citizen now.
He is now, but he came here as an
Yes.
immigrant. And it's like, look at all the great things that he's done. But they turn their back on just like, well, he's a great American citizen. It's like, but he wasn't when he came here. So
Yeah, I mean,
why is it okay for that immigrant to be accepted, but not, say, somebody else who could...
Now they're
possibly make
changing
an
it, though. They're not making it about all immigrants. They're now making it about preferred immigrants. So now they're saying, and this is crazy, too, because in the same breath, sometimes it sounds like they're de-emphasizing education. But they're now saying that if you're educated from another country and you're trying to get in, we should make it easier. So what they want to do is want the immigrant class to come in and be the top, not the bottom. And the argument from a lot of people is, hey, those immigrants at the bottom doing those undesirable jobs are the ones who fuel the economy. Because if people don't do those jobs, then a lot of things get neglected and prices go up, because all of a sudden you got to put other people in those roles, and those other people aren't willing to take $7.25 an hour to do them. So I think it'll be, there's so many things in the next 4 years. I think like NATO, what happens with Ukraine. I mean, we're going to see that in the next month. Like literally in 3 weeks.
Yep. When the inauguration day takes place, January 20th, I'll be curious to know, because that was one of the promises made. When I get in the office, I'll be able to call them and be able to stop that war.
I mean, Joe Biden is still funneling money into Ukraine as we speak, and basically some of the money we're giving them now, it's not even going to Ukraine, it's going to NATO, and that NATO Secretary General has the ability to allocate those funds. And to me, can you imagine, like, before FDR, they used to wait until March to replace the old government. Now they've cut that time in half. Then the real argument about making it January 1, how much time, think about it. Joe Biden right now is doing a whole bunch of pardons, whole bunch of spending, because he's trying to get it done because the will of the American people has chosen a different direction.
Correct.
And I think that's concerning on Biden's part, because in some ways I'm like, elections have consequences. And I don't think you can take the Congress and the president out of power once they lose an election. But I do think, some of the stuff that Joe Biden is doing is dangerous. And 4 years from now, kind of like Biden, Donald Trump's going to be done with his second term, and there's going to be no third term hanging over him. So then he's going to be able to behave whatever way he wants to.
Yeah, but the perfect example of the flip side of that coin, when what is it? The 2016 election, 2015, and when Samuel Alito had,
You're right.
Antonin Scalia, when he had passed away.
Yeah.
And, Merrick Garland and Mitch McConnell said, no, let's keep this open for the next presidency, because, you're going to lose, your term is done. Somebody else might come in here different with that way. He kept that job open for a year.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't be doing Supreme Court nominees. Okay, cool, great reason. I didn't like it. I was not a fan of it that way, because you can't leave a vacancy open that long. Fast forward 2016, all of a sudden it's like 45 days before the election. RBG
2019,
excuse me. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away. in 30 days or
Yeah.
something, they force-fed Amy Coney Barrett down our throat and stuff that way. So it's like you stop and think, I mean, that's less than a month from an election day. You know, and then that was the speech of, well, elections have consequences wasn't as big there as it was now with, well, Joe Biden should be worried about blah, blah. You know, it's going to change over. Okay, but you weren't saying that when your guy was in
True.
office and he did somebody, and a Supreme Court nominee, or, you know, person that way is going to have far-reaching effects than, I can't even hate them to make this, you know, closer, you know, some election. They're going to have longer lasting impacts than money being funneled to another country for another war. Because, you know, that's going to come and go, and that'll be away with. But
So then I got to say it. So if we're going to play that game, because the Republicans have already shown they're willing to go all the way to the edge.
oh yeah,
So then should Joe Biden have a conversation with Kamala Harris about January 6th? Because you know what she does on January 6th, right?
I mean, to me, it makes what would make, if he was going to do anything, what he should have done is, you know, do whatever he wants to within reason. But even then, you don't have to need it anymore since the Supreme Court earlier this year found that you get presidential immunity. He could do whatever he wants to that way and not be prosecuted.
Or he can just tell Kamala Harris, hey, Donald Trump and his lawyers argued last time that Mike Pence didn't have to certify the election with diselectors. So could Joe Biden potentially attempt? But again, I don't think the Democrats are ever going to go to that
No, because
extreme.
they understand the rule of law. They understand the peaceful transition of power. They understand the way historically it's always been.
So as we say that, in this state currently, Josh Stein's powers are being limited by the state legislature changing rules.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Donald Trump can't run again. Technically, that's the rule right now. Now, like I tell my students every day, any amendment can be unamended by a new amendment. So they could change the 22nd Amendment and add the 28th Amendment, allowing Trump to run for another term. But I think they'll never do that because if they do that, that opens the door for Obama to run again, who is still a decade younger than Trump. And it'd be an interesting conversation with the Democrats about Obama's third term.
Oh yeah.
But,
Plus also too, you know, you stop and think of you know, if you open that up, you got to have 2/3 of the country vote for it. 2/3 of the Congress has got to be in favor of that. There's no way you're going to get.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah, you're never going to get. Republicans and Democrats don't agree on what day of the week it is.
I think that in the Senate you can get 66.
You think so?
I think that there are senators on the left who will sit down and go, who's next? Literally, that's the conversation. That's maybe another podcast. Who's the next Democratic candidate for president? So if you think it
would be a good one to see who would be the next, in our opinion, for both sides. Because right now there's no clear.
J.D. Vance. But no,
and then the problem I have with him, like I brought up the Obama thing, he's got no experience. Now they did Obama, but Obama won. Now they did Trump, but Trump won.
Yeah, but
so
now he has 4 years to be vice president. And with the way Trump likes to operate, you know Vance is going to get a opportunity to do things.
Yeah, but last time we had a vice president take over, you had 12 years of no good.
But you got Peter Thiel picking him. So you know economically this man got to be savvy in some way. So remember those oligarchs we talked about? One of those oligarchs handpicked J.D. Vance. Remember when J.D. Vance was first announced and the right was like, this guy's terrible? And then slowly but surely they all changed their mind about him. And now he looks like the prince in waiting. But the Democrats, when they start to have that conversation and that debate about how you appease all these group of people, how do you hang on to black women without nominating Kamala Harris again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they're going to say, you know who black women love? Barack Obama.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be open with that way.
I mean, Trump in 2019, when COVID was happening, was like, can we really have an election during a crisis like this? Not thinking about World War II and there being elections. But he brought that up, so you just think automatically, if Donald Trump gets 2 years into this next presidency and he's still looking healthy, still going out doing rallies for no reason, you got to remember, Donald Trump re-signed up to run for president earlier than any major candidate in the history of America. So he signed up as soon as he could. You don't think legally he's right now having people research, can he run again? What is What are the details of the 20? We all thought the 14th Amendment was settled, right?
This is true.
And now we're talking about anchor babies. So that 14th Amendment says that if you are born in this country, you get all the protections of a citizen. But right now, Donald Trump is telling people that they do not understand that, and that is not necessarily true. Privacy rights, 14th Amendment, Roe v. Wade is settled law. That's what people said for years.
Yeah, that's what
got reversed.
That's what they all said was that way until it's good for them.
And again, that's what I'm saying. Like, the beautiful part about our Constitution is those 27 amendments that started out as 10. Mm-hmm. And again, people say, well, the Constitution is a strong state. I'm like, no. All it takes is one very influential person with some very influential ideas. Mm-hmm. So people think about Abraham Lincoln, they should think about that emancipation, and then they should talk about those 3 amendments that came right along with them. Without Abraham Lincoln, I don't know if we get any of those things, but you had to have Lincoln. So now when I think of today, and I think like Donald Trump is 2 years in, and he knows that he has 2 years left in his political career is over. And we've all seen this man. He does not want to give up that limelight.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of those things. Well, I think it's a good spot to stop here, so we got to stop and think about next time we get together, who on the horizon, where do we think 2025 will get us into, and then the next 4 years to stop and think and look at it from that standpoint. Since I like doing song lyrics, here's a good one we've been talking about Hamilton a lot. How do you say no sweat? Finally on the field, we've had quite a run. Immigrants, we get the job done.
Oh!
From Yorktown, from the Hamilton musical. And ironically, it's called Yorktown, the world turned upside down. Maybe that's what will happen in the next 4 years. Who knows? But we'll be here with you the next handful of time to see how everything all works out. With you always is Efren and my trusty co-host with me, Coop.
Deuce!